Welcome, everybody. I want to thank you for joining us. Go ahead and take a look at the messaging and questions box. We invite you to ask lots of questions throughout. Do not be shy. But Ryan, how about you introduce yourself? Just talk a little bit about your background and how you came into social work and how you transitioned from the military to social work.
Sure. So I got my bachelor's degree at WSU, and then I actually joined the military. I joined the Air Force active duty, and I worked in California, working remotely with full motion video. So basically, drone planes in the video on those. I was interpreting everything that I saw on that video. Then I transferred into the Washington Air National Guard here in Tacoma, Washington, because I didn't realize that was a thing, and it is at Camp Murray, which is just across the highway from Joint Base Lewis McChord. So we have that, and basically, when I joined the military, I thought that I was answering a call within myself for service. And my interpretation of service was if I wanted to serve, I needed to be in the military. And I didn't really understand that my real calling was social work. So throughout my military career, I continued to find that the thing that really made me happy was my one-on-one interactions with the people that I was serving with. For instance, my first shirt would come sit next to me while I was doing my job, and he would talk about, his wife being deployed and their kids really struggling with their mom being gone for almost a year. And my commander going through a horrible divorce and how hard that was on him. And I realized slowly over time that serving for me meant serving individual people more so than serving my country. Although I'm really proud of the work I did active duty and in the Air National Guard, what really satisfies me as a human is social work. And so when I was in the Air National Guard, I realized that was my calling. So I applied to my master's degree program through UW, and I got accepted, and I started a 3-year extended degree program, which allowed me to still work for my unit almost full time the whole program. And basically it allowed me to transition and get hired into a social work role before I even graduated, because the program, I think, is really top notch. So if you're interested in social work, I would highly recommend looking at UW's programs because they have multiple campuses. I went with Seattle, and fortunately for my military service, it paid for my master's degree, which was approximately $90,000. So my time was well compensated because of that and getting my master's degree.
Yeah, $90,000 is a lot of money.
It is.
If you were to describe to the people on the call, what is social work? How would you describe it?
So there's 3 levels of social work. There's one-on-one social work, which is micro social work. There's community level social work, which is meso. And then there's worldwide, nationwide, and that's macro social work. So, you might be doing different jobs social support networking things like WIC and child family protective services. Those are more of a community level kind of service. Whereas I am specializing in more micro. So I am a therapist. I do one-on-one and family couples therapy, basically, giving people mental health services individually. With my military background, I also specialize in military families because the military is a special culture and it is different. The struggles that military families have are often unique because there aren't a lot of civilian careers that have, family members leaving to clandestine destinations where they can be killed in action, and then come back and act like everything is fine. And, with a job that's so taxing on people, we have, it's a really complex system there. So it's really my honor to be able to sit with folks and give them a safe place to express themselves, to unravel emotions, to, work through grief or what have you, mental illness, physical illness, even that can have a real toll on people's mental health.
So you talked about the military being a taxing job. Did you see people getting mental health services while they were in the military?
So this is actually part of how I entered into social work because in my career field, there was a really high suicide rate because of how stressful the job was. And so we actually did have an embedded psychologist, and the military and especially the Air Force is really trying to destigmatize mental health care and getting help when you need it, because there was this big thing about if you needed mental health care, then you were going to get kicked out of the military, which isn't the case. And so I think that they've been working really hard at trying to alleviate that stereotype and for people to really actually get the services they need when they need it, instead of letting things build and compound, because mental health issues don't usually just go away. They really have to be resolved in order to go away. So it's not something that you can really just say, oh, I'm just going to shove that deep down inside and ignore it. It'll be fine. And that usually doesn't work out very well in the long term.
And in our first session, you talked a little bit about how the military shaped you and what skills it gave you. Can you talk a little bit about that? What was it like in the military? What was hard? What was fun?
Yeah. So what was hard in the military, I think, was sort of being micromanaged. I always needed to validate my existence, so to speak, and keep track of all of my time, within 10-minute increments of everything that I'm doing with my day, to make sure that the government and tax dollars are being well spent on me. So that was really an interesting adjustment. Being micromanaged can feel like a hostile work environment sometimes when your boss is constantly saying what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? But I think that it's sort of like the military way, because basically military leadership wants to make sure that they're not there's not any fraud, waste, or abuse. So they need to make sure that everyone is very gainfully employed all the time. Whereas now in my civilian career, I have my job expectations, and it is assumed that I am doing my job. And I have control over when I clock in to work, when I clock out of work, when my day starts and when my day ends. And no one really questions that. So it's definitely a different kind of environment going from military to civilian. One of the funnest things that I did in the military was actually I played volleyball for the Air Force, and I got to go to Arizona for like 2 months and play volleyball like 12 hours a day. And I played volleyball in college, so I was really excited to be able to get back into the sport and play really in a semi-professional manner because I was being paid to play. And I got to go to a national tournament, and it was awesome. I didn't expect to do that initially, but there are lots of different sports that the military services have teams on that you can get into and play. So that was a really cool benefit. Traveling was a big one. There's nothing like getting to go to Hawaii for a month and get paid and still be able to go to the beach after work every day and be on a beautiful resort and have it be paid by my job. Pretty awesome benefit there. The same could be said for Germany. Like, who gets to just go and live in Germany for 6 months? Mostly just military people. So the travel is awesome in the military if traveling is something you want to do. And also the flexibility of the GI Bill and getting your education paid for. Because like I said, my master's degree cost $90,000 and I didn't have to pay a penny of that. So that's pretty awesome. I feel like I'm missing part of your question.
Oh, no. What would you say for kids that are considering going into the military? Like saying, I'm kind of thinking about it, but I'm not sure. Like, what advice would you have for them?
My advice for kids that are thinking about it is if you're looking at a job in the military that you don't think that you could pay for the schooling in the civilian world, like if you can't find scholarships or if you don't have the grades or something, you can use your military time to your advantage by picking a job that will translate into the civilian world and by doing at least one active enlistment so that you can have access to that GI Bill. And you can, it's worth so much money if you end up deciding to like pursue your bachelor's degree and then your master's degree. I wish I would have known that so that I didn't have to rack up student loan debt for my undergraduate, for sure.
That's a great tip there. I had someone in the chat ask, can you share with us your most memorable experience as a social worker?
As a social worker, so I had a client in crisis often, and this person was only 15 years old and they had tried to take their own lives 3 times when they became my client. And one day they were in school and they were having a really bad day, and I then heard through the staff that they asked this person, you know, what are things that make you feel better? And the first thing that they said was, talking to my school therapist makes me feel better. And knowing that I'm making such a huge impact on someone that is struggling so much is amazing. Like, I know it's corny when people say like social workers are like superheroes, but in those moments, it's really humbling and gratifying to know that I'm making a real impact on my clients' lives and that they're able to move forward in their lives because of the work that they're doing with me. Because I'm really not doing the work. I'm just enabling them and asking the right questions for them to do the work for themselves.
That's really impactful and also inspiring and humbling, like you said. I'm sure that some of those experiences are why you wanted to be a social worker and a counselor. Um, can you talk a little bit just about what that process was like to apply as a counselor and kind of what was it like when you started and how long have you been doing it?
Yeah, so I've been a school counselor for almost 5 months now. They actually hired me before I graduated, and the application process was not as vigorous as I thought it was going to be because I had my military mindset. Like I thought I was going to have to sit down in a suit in front of like 10 people and get like rapid fire, like just, shredded by all these people asking me all these questions. But it was actually like really friendly and there was only like 2 people. And so it wasn't as intimidating as I was expecting. So I don't know if that's my military sort of mindset, like thinking like, oh, this is so nice and calm. But I would say that researching the company that you're interviewing with to understand what their mission and vision are so that you can sort of help verbally align yourself to those mission and visions. And if they are truly aligned with you, then it's probably a good match. And if you're like totally pulling it out of your butt and making it up, then it's probably not a good match anyway. But I would say that the interview process was knowing a little bit about the company that you're interviewing for is going to go a long way in helping you. And also asking questions. If you see that people, rated that company low, like ask them, like, what are you doing to improve your employee experience? Don't be afraid to ask hard questions in an interview process, because I think that most people are impressed if you can ask hard questions, because in social work, you're going to be asking a lot of hard questions.
And what are some of the things that you're seeing your students struggle with lately?
So COVID has done a lot of interesting things to our school systems. I work in 3 elementary schools. So some of my students started school during COVID. So they started out remotely and their social skills really declined through that whole year and a half of remote schooling. And then when they came into the classroom, they didn't know how to actually like physically interact with other students, and having, that communal academic environment that we have where everyone needs to be quiet and you can't just mute your computer and then, do whatever you might do when you have your, computer muted and you're like, yelling at someone and your dog is jumping on your lap, and like you don't have that. You're in class and you're supposed to focus for the whole school day, and there's no muting your microphone and turning off your camera. So it's different, and students are really struggling with that. And I think that another thing that really got kids really dysregulated is when the mask ban was lifted and people could see everyone's mouths. It was like overstimulation. A lot of my younger kids were very dysregulated from that. And in sessions, the common theme was, I've never seen all of these people's mouths. It's weird. I only ever see my family's whole face. And like thinking back, like some of these kids were, really when all of this started. So they might not even really remember pre-COVID times, particularly because a lot of young children aren't out in the community a lot before they're in school. So it's been a really interesting process of watching these children navigate like remote learning to fit like in person. And, a lot of people are still struggling with grief from COVID losses. I think that really increased the number of young people, really young people, that were having like multiple losses or losses within their own communities of, children passing away from COVID. That's also been a pretty tough thing.
What gives you hope, like as you look forward for the next 2 years, either with what you're seeing in your students or just in your life specifically?
Can you repeat the question for me?
Of course. Yeah. So what gives you hope, like thinking towards the future, either in your job or what you're seeing in your students?
I would say that what gives me hope is that so many of these children that I see have such hard lives, but they have so much resilience, and they are so bright and brilliant, and they shine so brightly when they have support. And it just shows me that humanity is amazing as a whole. And even when things like aren't going great, like politically or, across the world, or there's wars being waged on the other side of the world, like human beings are amazing creatures. And if I can help a couple people figure out how to survive in this world, then it's all worth it.
That's awesome. And one of the questions that we heard yesterday from panelists that I really loved their answers to was, what would you tell your younger self? Like, what would you tell your high school senior you?
I would tell my high school senior me that I need to get into an ROTC program so that I don't accrue debt from my undergraduate, and then I can commission straight into the military, because that is a much easier way to become a commissioned officer. And I would have made twice as much money in the military if I would have done that route. And when I talk to like my young family members, I tell them that, like, if I could go back, that's what I would have done. Just like I was a running start student in my senior year. And I told my little sister, like, if I could do it over, I would do the running start program at the beginning of my junior year so I could graduate high school with my associate's degree. And she did it. And she's a registered nurse, and she's only 25. So it definitely like put her leaps and bounds ahead of her peers, and it helped her spend less money and have to find less funding.
That's great. So find ways for everybody else to pay for your school, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Because who wants to pay student loans? No one.
Yes, I totally agree with that sentiment. So as you think ahead too, I know you've only been doing counseling for students for 5 months, but do you think that you will stay in the role as school counselor, or are there other areas of behavioral health or counseling that you're interested in exploring?
So I got to do one of my practicum sites at an equine assisted psychotherapy location. And my mid to long-term goal is to actually have my own private practice and do equine assisted psychotherapy on my own farm, essentially. The work that I can do as one human is amplified by a herd of therapy equines. So just picture sitting with me outside in a pasture, and I'm going to ask you to go work your emotional stuff out with a mini donkey. And it's going to be fun. And, you get pets and snuggles from adorable mini donkeys. So It
That's
adds extra.
that's really awesome. I'm surprised this didn't come out in our last session. Can you tell us just a little bit about what equine therapy looks like, or what did you experience in your practicum?
Yeah, so equine therapy is amazing. One of the most impactful exercises that I got to do, because I went through some sessions myself to have some firsthand experience of what it's like for a client. And I was asked to build an obstacle course out of pool noodles and like traffic cones to represent my military career. And basically put obstacles in your course representing the obstacles that you faced throughout this path. And so I did. And then I was supposed to catch a horse and take it through my path. And it was amazing how, thinking about my military career, and although like you're surrounded by, you know, so many people all the time, I realized how alone I felt at times during my military career as a woman in the intel field, where there's not a lot of women, and in the military where you know, there's less representation of women. And it really hit me like how alone I felt sometimes, because traveling that path that I had created, I was like, wow, I have this animal by my side and I don't feel alone right now. But I remember so distinctly feeling alone sometimes when my job was hard and when I was on nights for 9 months on end, and what have you. So it's really an amazing experience to be able to sort of remove yourself and like play your life out on the animals, and really like get outside your head. So it really, I think, gives you more space to work stuff out and to unravel things. And like when people share hard stories, it's like I've had people tell the most heartbreaking stories, and you look like you move from the client and you look out in the pasture and 7 animals are just staring at them, taking in their story. And it's just really amazing work.
That's really awesome and completely inspiring. And how did you see your clients that you were working with, like in that experience, react with the animals there?
I think that it's an added motivation for younger clients, because if you're really leaning into therapy, it's hard work. And so, you know, if you're really working in therapy, you're probably not always going to be like, oh man, I'm so excited to dig into my deepest, darkest feelings today. It's going to be awesome. But knowing that you get to like hang out with the animals, I think sort of softens the impact and helps sort of balance your hard work with the enjoyment of the animals.
That's great.
Yeah.
I put a message in the chat that you're very inspiring. And so I, want to thank you just for some of the things you shared today. I think like in both sessions, you just shared a lot of amazing tidbits and tips and just insights into what behavioral therapy looks like, as well as the military. You've kind of got a two-for experience here in this chat. So are there any remaining thoughts that you want to leave with our students and attendees today?
Yeah, so I think that social work is a very unique calling. I think it can be very hard work emotionally, but if you find that you are the kind of person that people come to, that people levitate to talk to you or to ask advice, and you find yourself saying, well, what are your goals? What do you think? I want to support you. How can I support you? These are the questions of an innate social worker. And I didn't learn that until way later in the game. I'm really happy that I have all the experiences that I have. But if I would have had the right mentor earlier in my life, I probably would have been on this path a lot sooner. So just sort of like ask yourself. I know in the beginning seminar, someone said, I saw the question, how do you figure out what path of healthcare? And I think it's really about like, what kind of impacts make you happy? What kind of impacts satisfy your soul?
That's awesome and great advice. And now I think all of the students want to go out and find a mentor. You've heard how it's been so awesome for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. Again, I appreciate your time today, and everyone that attended in the chat as well. You're getting lots of applause there, so thank you so much.